Hi, everyone, and welcome to the AIHM Wellness Webinar. Today, we have our featured guest, Dr. Shamini Jain, with us, and we're so excited. For those of you coming to this webinar for the first time, the Academy of Integrative Health and Medicine is a global interprofessional integrative health association working to transform healthcare, body, mind, spirit, community, and planet. So I just am so honored to have with us today Dr. Shamini Jain. Shamini is a scientist, psychologist, and social entrepreneur. She's an assistant professor in the Department of Psychiatry at UC San Diego, the president and CEO of the Consciousness and Healing Initiative, a nonprofit collaborative accelerator that connects scientists, health practitioners, innovators, and social entrepreneurs to forward the science and practice of healing. She obtained her BA in Neuroscience and Behavior from Columbia University, her PhD degree from the SDSU UC San Diego Joint Doctoral Program in Clinical Psychology with a research focus in psychoneuroimmunology. She's conducted her clinical residency at the La Jolla, California Hospital, UC San Diego, and her postdoc fellowship at UCLA's Division of Cancer Prevention and Control Research. She is a student of Reverend Rosalind Breer in the healing arts, and she just is really one of the pioneers in Biofield and consciousness healing. And we're just so excited to have you here today with us, Shamini, and to have you share all the important work that you all have been doing.
Thank you, Tabby. It's my pleasure and my honor. And, we're pleased to have the Academy as an ongoing partner with the Consciousness and Healing Initiative. I just want to take a moment before we begin. There's a lot going on in our world, and we're going to be exploring the biofield, and I'm going to be sharing with you some of the latest and greatest findings on the biofield, including how we're fostering systems change. And we can talk about systems change, right? Everything in our world is pointing towards the need for systems change, and we can have some lively discussion today around that. We'll certainly be talking about it from the biofield perspective, which is how do we incorporate healing practices more readily into healthcare to alleviate trauma, pain, and suffering? So that's going to be a big focus of our talk. But first, let's just acknowledge what's going on and take a few minutes to practice together. So I'm going to invite everyone to just simply relax in your chair or on the floor, wherever you are, whether you're sitting or standing. And let's just take a moment to feel our feet. Our feet may be touching the ground. They may be in shoes. They may be barefoot. If you're short like I am, they might be resting on the bottom of your chair instead of the ground. Just allow yourself to relax into your body for a moment. If it feels comfortable, close your eyes or let them raise comfortably on something in front of you. And now let's explore what it's like to have the breath simply come into the body without forcing, without trying to direct it in any particular place. We might allow ourselves to simply rest comfortably on our sit bones. And feel the release of energy flowing down the legs, down to the feet, into the earth. Allowing the breath to guide this process, simply grounding into the earth. We can open the soles of our feet to connect more deeply with Mother Earth. And as we feel our feet on the ground and we feel ourselves releasing any tension, any sensations that we just let flow down the legs, out the feet, into the earth. We can also feel Mother Earth energy touching us, touching the soles of our feet, and rising up the body. Feeling the solidity and strength of earth energy in our feet, our ankles, our calves, our knees, our thighs and sit bones, the hips, the bladder, the sex organs, the belly, allowing the breath to simply breathe through and allowing Earth's energy to continue up the body through our solar plexus, the back of our spine, the lower back and tailbone, up to the front and back of the heart, the lungs, the shoulders and arms, the neck, back of the head, the front of our faces, our lips, our nose, our eyes, our forehead, the top of our head, the crown of our head. Feeling the solidity, stability, and the nurturing quality of energy that's always here with us as we connect more deeply with Mother Earth. And we are one of her living creatures, part of this beautiful ecosystem. And thanking Mother Earth for her nurturance and her blessings. When we're ready, we can open our eyes. It's really nice to be here with you. And I want to thank Tabby and the entire AIHM team for being so swift in fostering these webinars and these community gatherings so that we can all be together during what can be pretty challenging times. And, you know, the topic of today is really on what we call the biofield. And I've probably met, a few of you in previous talks. I've been at some of the AIHM conferences. She has done some things with AIHM in the past, so hoping that I'm talking to both old and new friends. But for those of you who are unfamiliar with this term of the biofield, it's really the fields of energy and information that guide our health. We could say it's kind of a new term for a very old concept in a way. And, when people ask us, well, what do you mean exactly by the biofield? That's a pretty broad term, the fields of energy and information that guide our health. What I tell them is that, biofield can really be considered in some ways a framework. And it happens at levels of scale. So you can talk about the biofield of a cell. You can talk about the biofield of a person. You can even talk about the biofield of a dyad or a community, and you can talk about the biofield of the earth. And the research is really spanning all of these different areas of the biofield, and that's what makes it so fascinating. So we know a lot about some of these aspects of the biofield already, right? So, we're physicians and healthcare providers here. We know that when we place electrodes around the heart area, we can measure the electrocardiogram, and that tells us something useful and meaningful from the electromagnetic emanations of the heart. We get valuable clinical information. That's a biofield. So are biofields, that we measure from the skull when we look at electroencephalography. Same thing. It turns out we can also measure the electromagnetic emanations of cells, and that tells us something about cell health and cell function. So we can look at it in all these ways. And those are the aspects of biofields, right, that aren't so controversial. But the ones that are more controversial are, of course, the ones that basically underlie all of what we call today holistic and integrative medicine. So these are terms and concepts and understandings that have been around for millennia, including chi, ki, prana, many, many different terms in many, many different cultures. So these are the subtle energy aspects that are used not only in healing touch and in therapeutic touch and in Reiki and in pranic healing and in laying on of hands, but really are also understood to be fundamental basis of things behind the way chiropractic manipulation has started, or a core principle in naturopathy. It is this idea of the vital life force, the field of regenerative healing that exists within us and between us. So it's a fascinating area of study because it really, for those of us who are interested in understanding not just how do we treat disease, but how do we really foster healing, for me personally, it's been really a really wonderful quest, really my whole life to better understand how does healing work. And I think the biofield teaches us a lot about healing. So about 4 or 5 years ago, we actually held a meeting exploring what we know about the science of healing in the biofield, and particularly these subtle energy aspects, but also things like devices. And with Mimi and Rowney being one of our main partners for that meeting that we had in 2014, we published a special issue on biofield science and healing, which was published by Global Advances of Health and Medicine. It's available free on our website, and I'll share the links with you toward the end here. So we've been exploring this scientifically for some time, and it's probably no surprise to many of you that this particular area of biofield science still kind of lags behind research in other areas. And one of the reasons for that is because we're studying the subtle, and we still live in a model of materialism in science and medicine where it's really hard for most people to see things beyond the physical body. And even when we try to do studies in things like healing touch or Reiki, the questions are always, well, what's the mechanism? How does that work in the physical body? And what's the physical mechanism? How is energy, kind of transduced through the body in these ways? We do have these studies, I've conducted some myself, that show that hands-on healing, healing touch can affect us all the way down to our immune levels, but we're really just beginning those studies. And what we've noticed is, there's kind of a barrier to some of this work. I want to share with you some of what we've been doing lately in the Consciousness and Healing Initiative, which is to really explore this from more of a systems change level. We can think of the mindfulness movement as one example. So, many of you are probably aware, mindfulness has really, kind of hit a boom in the last decade or two, but it wasn't that long ago that mindfulness was considered really out there and just sort of not a real scientifically valid kind of approach or practice because the science hadn't been done. And let's go back a little bit further, okay? 50 years ago, the idea that your emotions affected your immune system, or even that your brain was connected to the immune system, was considered heresy because people didn't have a frame of reference. And now, of course, that has changed. So we see the biofield as, kind of the next logical leap, if you will. And it's not even really a leap at this point. It's really the logical next step for us to understand how consciousness affects the healing process. The biofield can be considered a bridge in understanding how consciousness, and some would call spirit, our spiritual life, our spiritual experiences, affect our health. So we're moving more and more toward the subtle. I'm going to share some specific things that we've been doing in the Consciousness and Healing Initiative and lead you to some really fantastic resources that we've made available to you. Is this slide kind of nicely showing itself now?
Looks great.
Okay.
Yeah,
great.
Thank you, Shamini.
So this is a collaborative endeavor that many of us have been involved in over the past year, which I had called Systems Mapping for Healing Evolution. And essentially the premise is this, right? We are not going to be able to foster systems change in any field unless we're working together, because even healthcare is an integrated system. And if we think about the biofield work and the way that we want to scale the biofield work, it's not actually just in science. We have to educate people on what the biofield is. We have to foster community and foster the community of healers. You know, our healers are all over the place, and some are in community, but some are lacking community. We have to talk to our policymakers and help them understand what the evidence base actually is behind some of these therapies. And we have to galvanize new technologies that might help us, for example, measure what are called these so-called subtle aspects of the field that might guide our health and even help us detect disease before it starts. So it's, you know, it's a pretty big endeavor, right? And the way to move forward is to move forward together. So we began that process. And, you know, really the point of this project that we did over the past year was to identify what are those key levers of change? What are those key pressure points that we need to unlock in order to make this field move in the way that we want to see it move? Why do we want to see this? We want to see the alleviating of suffering. We want to see these kinds of evidence-based healing programs and modalities integrated into healthcare. We want to teach people how to sense their own biofield and use it for their own health prevention and health maintenance purposes, right? So how do we get there? It's really kind of the question. We culminated in, you know, kind of putting together a number of resources which are all available on our website. The easiest way to get this information, by the way, we have an 81-page report. We have about a 10-page executive summary. We've got incredible resources and databases. All are absolutely free. And you simply go to reportonhealing.com to access all of it. So one thing that we realized is that there are actually about 6,000 peer-reviewed publications in biofield science. So this isn't just clinical studies, but these are cell studies, these are animal studies, these are anthropological studies, all kinds of different studies exploring this idea of the biofield, exploring the science behind the biofield. So if people tell you, oh, there's no science in this area called biofield, that's simply not true. There is, and we hope to actually galvanize a lot more, particularly in the clinical area. One of the things that we also did just to aid, you know, our practitioners in understanding where the data is we created what we called a landscape map for clinical studies. And we identified nearly 400 clinical studies that have been done with what we call biofield therapies. So that includes things like Reiki, healing touch, pranic healing, therapeutic touch, and many others. And it's important to understand that this landscape map is not based on a systematic review. These 400 studies that we've identified have not been evaluated for quality or outcomes. We're simply showing, you know, kind of literally the landscape of what's out there so people can see, but there are ways to click on the bubbles and access the exact papers. We also have some other infographics that are based on systematic reviews that you can dig into on that reportonhealing.com webpage. We've also identified that there are a lot more researchers doing this work worldwide than we thought. There are over 400, maybe 450 people, researchers at universities and credible nonprofit organizations that are actively conducting research in the areas of biofield science. And many of these people are at top tier universities. So that includes people in Harvard, UCSF, UCSD, MD Anderson, and many other areas. And one of the things that they tell us is, you know, we really need community. We can't talk about these areas of consciousness and healing with most of our colleagues. We would like to be part of a synergistic group that moves the field forward. And, you know, they're really doing the best they can with limited resources and limited community. We've started to map this out for people in a network map that shows basically worldwide all of the different people and organizations, research institutions, healing institutions that are really helping to move the needle forward in biofield science and healing. So it's just our way, again, of starting to help organize and cohere our communities so everyone's aware of what everyone else is doing and who else is out there so we can foster collaborations. We also have a quite brilliant science and innovation director for the Consciousness and Healing Initiative, David Musim, who is kind of a top-tier scientist in biophysics and has been spending numerous decades now in the fields of bioelectromagnetics. And he's put together a really wonderful summary of what we know about subtle energy devices, because there are a lot of those being used by practitioners all over the world, but we don't really know much about them scientifically. So he's sort of laid it all out in terms of who are the companies, is there actually data behind these devices or not, how are the, you know, what are their claims? So it's just, you know, some more informational work that we really want to share with you in the community so that you can be educated on the latest and greatest in those devices and whether there's actually data behind them or not. So as I said, this is our network map, kind of just shows you some examples of so how many people are actually part of this and part of this field. The research specializations of biofield scientists are vast. They include all of these different areas. So the biofield is really being examined, in all of these different disciplines. It's very much a transdisciplinary field. We also conducted a number of interviews with healers from various traditions. And then this is really an area that we want to expand more for our community. We're planning on doing, with some funding support, we hope. We really want to put forth some education for our practitioners and for the greater community and all of these different healing approaches. Because as you can see, this is just a really short list of all of the different ways that people are fostering healing in others, utilizing, sensing not only their biofield, but the biofield of others, and working with that biofield in order to stimulate a healing response. And I can tell you that one of the things that we've heard repeatedly, people see the field differently. They experience the field differently. Some healers will actually see the aura and they will see energy fields. Some see it as what they call a layered field, meaning they see energies in different layers. Some don't see it that way. Some feel it. Some even hear it. It's just absolutely amazing how people utilize and expand their senses to kind of get information about this field around and inside the body, to gain information about a person's health status, state of mind, state of connection with their soul. And I mention that because really the fundamental thing that connects all of these practices is an understanding that, one, many of the so-called healers don't like to be called healers. They're basically saying, I'm not a healer, I'm a healing facilitator. And what I'm doing is fostering a process by which a person can connect in more deeply with their own soul, their own spirit, their own higher guidance. There are different terms that they use. But essentially, it's that connecting process, that realignment with one's spirit or soul, that is fostering the healing. And that has just come through literally in every interview. And people have slightly different ways of describing it, but that's really part of the commonality. And then, of course, there are others. What is healing? Healing is essentially a return back to unconditional love. There's a lot there to unpack and explore, and there's so much wisdom here from the healers. We really hope that in our next iteration of the work that we do, we're bringing that forth more readily for the community. So, these are just some of the names of people we interviewed, and of course there are many others. We also interviewed a number of different people in these domains: policy, education, community practice, research, technology. Tabby, you were part of the in-person meeting that we had in July at 1440 Multiversity, where we brought together all of these people to start really exploring, okay, what are the needs? What are the barriers? How do we overcome these barriers? And how do we work synergistically to foster systems change in the area of biofield science and healing? And, so anyway, these are some of the things that we've learned. There are a lot of articles. There are a lot of articles actually from Asian and traditional Chinese medicine that we need to be looking at more deeply, related to how we're treating patients using the biofield. There's a lot of international studies. There's anthropological and sociological studies that need to be examined as well. In terms of the clinical research, the next step for us that we want to move forward, and we have a fantastic interdisciplinary team across universities that want to carry out a systematic review for biofield therapies in trauma and pain. It seems like there is enough meat there that we really need to be diving into this. This is, of course, how we influence clinical practice guidelines. We must do both what's called an evidence map, where we more broadly map the evidence and sort of show where the evidence base is in different areas. That will help to guide research directions. But of course, the systematic review of taking all of this work and evaluating it systematically for quality and outcomes, potentially even a meta-analysis depending on how the data looks, would be extremely helpful for our field at this point. It's just simply an absolutely needed direction in order for us to guide policy and to guide clinical practice guidelines. It's absolutely vital for us to move forward in that area. The device landscape, as you can imagine, is absolutely wide. It's really wide, and we have to sort of name what's happening here. These are generally small startup companies. They are not set up or equipped to do FDA required studies, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 trials. So what is happening is, if you all are not aware of this, there are FDA wellness guidelines that people can sort of ascribe to for some of these devices, which basically say we're using these for wellness. We're not using these to treat pain. We're not using these to treat anxiety. We're not using this to treat any kind of medical disorder. So devices can be sold under FDA wellness guidelines. One of the things that we've noticed, though, is that the claims are exceeding the evidence. And this is a problem. This is a problem for the field. This is going to continue to be a problem until, you know, we kind of do something about it. And here we're not talking about policing, but we're really talking about being able to foster research that's meaningful for these devices. And we've had a number of these companies come to us and say, we would love to do research. So there is a need for partnership here with researchers, with engineers, with healers to explore the nature of these devices and their efficacy, even for wellness, even if it's not necessarily for a clinical condition. At this point, though, to quote David, our research and innovation director, it really is kind of the Wild West out there. There isn't a lot of evidence base to back up the claims, and people need to know that. So that's one of the things that we discovered over the past 13 months. As I mentioned, you know, there are real social barriers still for us to foster the research here. And a lot of that is still an overemphasis on materialism in the university settings. Makes it very difficult for our researchers to even feel safe talking about their interest in this field. That is a real issue. It continues to be a real issue. And it's the whole reason why we need to continue to foster community across our researchers and our healers, not only so we can dive in more deeply and understand each other, but also so we can be in community. That's really, really important. And one of the other key takeaways is that we really need to come to a common understanding of language. Not surprisingly, funding in this area remains a key barrier to making progress. We're doing everything we can, and certainly, you know, some of the other folks that we know are doing their best to galvanize funding to really catapult this area forward. There are people that really view the area of biofield science and healing as the next mindfulness, and they're very, very excited about galvanizing things forward. So we're very hopeful that we will be getting more and more funding towards the research and towards the education in these areas. As I mentioned, lots of different ways that healers say they're working with the field, lots of different areas that they think are helpful. Some of the standouts are trauma, pain, fertility, and, you know, what are called in the West somatic disorders and mystery disorders, things that people don't understand. It's, you know, these are a lot of the people that end up coming to healers. They're the folks that haven't been able to find solutions through traditional medical routes. And not surprisingly, healers see a lot of these folks, and often I'll be honest, you'll talk to a healer and they'll say, well, we can work with just about anything. But these are some of the things that they think would be really promising for us to be looking at from a research point of view, and certainly a lot of what they see in their practice. So what are key next steps for us? Well, we have laid this out in, you know, what one of my board members has called a giant octopus, but it actually has quite a bit of nuance to it. And that is, you know, how do we move the system? And we could also see this really as a model for integrative medicine and integrative health practices. While this is specific to the biofield sphere, you could apply this to, you know, how do we move the system to enhance naturopathy or functional medicine or acupuncture? We're all in sort of different areas and different levers of change that need to be moved. But what we've done here is done our best to synthesize everything that we've learned and say, okay, how are some of the concrete ways that we're going to foster global research empowerment? And what happens when we actually foster research? How does that influence policy? How does, you know, investing in technology actually improve public uptake of these practices and healthcare integration? So there's a lot here. It's available again on the reportonhealing.com website. And, you know, we would love for you to explore this and give us your feedback and let us know what areas you're really jazzed about helping forward. So as I mentioned, there's some key dependencies here. The evidence map and systematic review we see as really solidly a next step for research. Also seeding, you know, key investigators. That we have researchers ready to go in many universities, ready to partner with healing practitioners, ready to partner with MDs and doctors who have patient access. We do see, similarly to the acupuncture and other fields, the value in developing clinical study reporting guidelines for biofield healing. And that's something that our group would love to do in collaboration with healing practitioners. Other global action items include really scaling up and replicating really promising clinical research, such as some of the studies that we've done with cancer-related fatigue, cancer symptoms during treatment. There's a lot of really great research that's being done in the cancer field, both in terms of clinical and preclinical studies by numerous investigators. It's time for us to innovate new research methods and measures. And really, in order to move this field forward, we're going to have to establish centers for biofield science and healing at top-tier universities. One of the most interesting and maybe one of the biggest ways where we can really provide groundbreaking contributions to the field of healthcare is by deeply exploring and developing technology that can help us assess the biofield in the way that healers are. It's not to replace healers, but it's really to help scale this work more broadly. So of course it provides a there for people who say, we don't really know if this biofield work is real. Well, if you can actually demonstrate that you can use technology, say, for example, to measure biophoton emission from the fingers, which is something that Konstantin Kurakov and his group have been doing for decades. If we could actually demonstrate that there is at least some aspect of the biofield that can be reliably measured so that we could detect disease before it starts in the physical system, which is one of the premises, right, for all of our healers. They say they can detect these disease patterns before they actually manifest in the physical body. If we could actually develop technology that allows us to do that reliably, it's a game changer for science and medicine, because here you're talking about really what ends up being a teaching tool for people where they can measure aspects of their biofield and notice the changes related to their eating habits, to their emotional states, to their health habits, so that they're really monitoring on the bioenergetic level what's happening and detecting maladaptive patterns before they manifest into the physical system. Now that may seem like a really holy grail idea, but it's not. And I suspect that in the next decade, we will see advances toward this field. And certainly we have a number of people and groups that are very excited to move this forward, including people at Google and MIT and other places. So we're really hoping to galvanize this forward. It's really time. And there are very clear ways that we've sort of articulated in terms of how to do that. So see, these are some of the areas that our folks in the Biofield Technology Group are really excited about. So developing labs to assess and validate devices so that we can put that back out to the community and say, here's what we've learned about these devices, and here's what we've noticed they actually do, and here's how they might be helpful. As we mentioned, imaging devices, and really moving forward with what we call an X-Prize program so that we can create that so-called tricorder, that device that measures aspects of the biofield and detects disease before it begins in the physical system. With the practitioners, there's a number of things that are going on, really wonderful work being done by our colleagues. Melinda Connor, for example, is doing wonderful work, bringing together practitioners to explore both umbrella organizations of support, exploring ethics, principles, standards of practice, even potentially certification programs and legislation. The Integrative Health Policy Consortium is also doing work in this area on the policy level. So some really wonderful things happening there with gathering practitioners. We see the need for advisory panels that will essentially give voice to the research, give voice to the technology development, give voice to explaining how to articulate this and share this with key influencers in policy and other sectors. And educate the public from their own, hearts and minds and mouths. So again, involving practitioners here, I can't state, widely enough, is absolutely vital for the field to move forward in the right way. Other action items, a lot of people are excited about the idea of having a certification process. Certainly if we want to integrate this more readily into healthcare, and we want to incorporate everything from shamanic healing and laying on of hands and some of these other practices, there's going to have to be some type of certification process in order to do that if we want to try to work within the systems that we are. And of course, there are organizations like the Healing Touch community that have been doing this to some degree already as best they can and have standards and practices. So we do hope that this can be done more globally for the practitioner community. Communication is key. This is just, a necessary step. Everyone that we've talked to in policy and education, practitioners, research, we're really going to have to learn how to communicate this more broadly across our patients, with our patients, help them understand and explore what the biofield is for them, how it connects to their health, what are some key biofield-based practices that they can do, whether they come from Qigong, Tai Chi, yoga, meditation, healing touch. These all can be considered biofield-based practices. So really communicating this with the public in a way that it doesn't seem foreign or strange or woo is critical. And it's going to it's going to kind of take a transdisciplinary working group. And we do have several folks and organizations that are really excited about moving that forward as well. Communications will be really important. That includes, reframing the biofield healing and engaging in public relations, as well as consensus-driven, what we call consensus-driven technology, taxonomy, and language. So here's some of our ideas of things that we want to do next, including books and online resources on healing, perspectives on healing, and really linking those to some of our greatest pain points today: pain, trauma, restorative justice, and other areas. There's a lot we can learn from the wisdom of healers. And finally, increasing our experience of this, both for ourselves and for others, really diving into the practice is absolutely key. One thing that has come up that I think is relevant to this community that I know Tabby and we have all talked about, AIHM has been a leader in biofield education for practitioners for many years. We are aware that it is becoming increasingly difficult to get continuing education credits for areas including biofield science and healing, and even consciousness studies. So this is, again, a key barrier that we aim to kind of release as a barrier and destigmatize this area by fostering really what are science-based educational tools so that these regulatory agencies can make informed decisions around continuing education. That's really absolutely vital to the education of our healthcare providers to be able to provide those continuing education credits. Some of our global action items now, we have a few funders that are building and growing what they call a subtle energy and biofield healing funding collaborative. These are folks that are, coming in from the from the finance and the business worlds that are basically collecting, people together that want to invest together in this field. And so that's very exciting. So their vision really is to say, hey, we know this is a risky area. If you are looking to de-risk your investment, then come join us. These are all the different areas that people are working on in policy, education, research, technology. Let's pool our funds together and help galvanize this field forward. So we're very, very grateful to those funders that are moving that funding collective forward. The Consciousness and Healing Initiative continues to serve as a collaborative accelerator, and we hope to grow our movement into really a systems change coalition so that essentially we're all working together, because we recognize there needs to be a collaborative backbone that helps to bring all of our leaders in policy, education, technology, research together so that we're working synergistically and cohesively. That's going to be important for any systems change, and it's really going to be vital for systems change in this area. So, I know this is sort of not quite, here's the research, here's the practice. We wanted to give you more of a bird's eye view of really the state of what's happening in the field and the way that the folks kind of within the field are working together to galvanize the field forward. I do, have quite a bit of experience and understanding in the biofield research area, as well as to some degree biofield practice. And I'd just love to open it up to any questions that people might have. And if we have time, maybe we'll end with a little bit of a practice as well. And again, all of what I shared with you today is available freely through our website. Our website is the Consciousness and Healing Initiative. It's www.chi.is or www.chi.is. I'm going to put it in here so you can see it. So that's our general website. But if you want to go straight to the page where the report is and all of that, we've created a little alias here for you that's easy. And it's also easy for you to share with others. One of the things that we ask of you is that if you're passionate about this area, this report and the executive summary that we created it for people who don't know anything about the field. And I mean, certainly those of us who know something about the field learn a lot too when we get in there. But it's meant to really address those questions that people have, like, is this real? Is it just placebo? What do the studies say? What are the healers saying? So we really invite you to share these materials with your patients, with your other medical professionals, so that we can just begin to open the door to language and discussion around these really, pardon the pun, vital aspects of healing. So with that, I'll just open to questions.
Shamini, I just want to, first of all, thank you for really the extraordinary work. This is the type of work that the integrative community really needs. And I want to invite all of you, any practitioner out there that is in integrative, functional, naturopathic, energy workers, really download this report and read it. It is, there has been no work like this in the field. And so it really will help inform you and educate you as well around what is happening out there. So I just wanted to really thank you for all of this work, because you've been the driving force behind this, and it's so important for our collective community.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Tabby. We would love for you all to, to share the link of the report with the community. I think that it's really, for us, it's really crucial that our integrative health providers have access to the report and know about it and can share it with others. So thank you for that. So let's see, I see
some questions if there are any questions in the, let me pull up the Q&A here. So Lori Angel is asking, have you heard of Beamer, the Beamer mat at all?
Absolutely, yes, we're aware of that. I think it's one of many different devices that was evaluated in the database. There's several types of mats like those, and I know that a lot of practitioners are using them. Anecdotally, I've heard positive things from practitioners who are using them, and I apologize, but I'm not aware what the research. I believe they have done some research behind the Beamer, but it's not coming to top of mind at the moment.
Okay, we have another question coming in from Dr. Patricia Christie. She asks, have scientists explored the Christian Scientist healing methods that are very old practices? Is that considered Biofield based with spirituality? Would you consider that?
Yeah, it's a really great question, because Christian Science ones, I'm not sure what the difference is between that and laying on of hands. Laying on of hands, of course, is a very ancient practice in the Christian tradition and would be considered a biofield-based practice, absolutely. This is also, a great point of discussion, because one of the things that I think we need to really explore is whether we can really separate what we call biofield healing, or what some people call energy healing, from spiritual healing. Because when you talk to the healing practitioners, there really isn't that distinction. It's semantics. And one of the reasons why I think people have tried to, take the spiritual aspects out of it is, again, this idea that we're supposed to not talk about spirituality in medicine, which from my point of view is honestly a problem. But, I think for others, they, feel like, if you look at the mindfulness movement, it's a perfect example where they've done their best to secularize the practice, to try to make it global. And yet that what happens is it ends up causing confusion about what the nature is of the mechanisms of change. So many of what are being called energy healing modalities, the healing practitioners would call spiritual healing modalities. And without knowing exactly what the Christian Science methods are, I don't think there's been much, if any, research specifically on Christian Science healing methods, but there have been some studies on laying on of hands, and that's absolutely considered part of the biofield healing sphere.
Wonderful. And Shamini, could you post the direct link to the report itself for us?
Yeah,
lots of people are asking that, and I can also put that on Facebook then. We have another question coming in from Vicki Jackson. Are you aware of any research looking at hands-on practices and the interaction of the practitioner's biofield and the patient's relative to self-practices?
This is a great question, and it's one of the key areas that we have been saying we need to move forward in. There's very little published research looking at the interactions between patient and practitioner. There's just a smattering, and more really to be explored there. But this question also about what's the difference between biofield-based self-practice and biofield-based practice with a practitioner is a great question. Certainly, those of us in the clinical areas have been exploring, all of these integrative practices, you can say work with the biofield to a degree, right? So for a given patient, for example, you could think of, when someone is going through chemotherapy, for example, for cancer, what might be helpful as they go through chemotherapy, and then what might be helpful for their maintenance and their ongoing self-care after. So you could see a process, for example, where people might receive healing sessions while they're going through chemo because they're pretty wiped out. It may be hard for them to learn a new skill. We hear that a lot, right, from our patients. And yet, once that process is over and they've regained a bit of strength and energy, moving them towards a self-care practice like Tai Chi or Qigong would be very helpful. The research at this point usually focuses on one or the other and hasn't really looked at this in combination because, again, this is part of our reductionist model. We still are kind of under a paradigm. Many of us scientists, when we write these grants, are under the paradigm where the grant reviewers are asking, well, what's the active ingredient? And we're still not looking at things as a whole system. So, they want us to do these randomized placebo-controlled type trials that control for all of these variables that really foster healing because they want to know what the singular active ingredient is. And of course, it really doesn't work that way, right? It's really not the right model to study healing. Now, thankfully, we're excited because we're hearing that NCCIH, the National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health, is really starting to take more of a whole systems and whole person view in the way that we're going to look at integrative practices for health. So we hope that some of these more combination interventions and research funding to support research in combination interventions will be coming sooner than later.
Great, wonderful answer. We have another question from Lori Angel. As a massage therapist, I feel that my ability to melt stuck fascia is basically energy work. My hand's always getting super warm. Can you comment on this or speak to that question?
Thank you for naming it. It's really, again, can we say that massage therapists are not energy workers or work with energy? That would be really difficult to say. We all have a biofield. We can all sense the biofield. It's really a question of training and intention. So if you are working as a massage therapist, as an acupuncturist, even as a medical professional, I'm a clinical psychologist, and I can tell you that I can feel biofield changes without even intending to work with a person's field, just by sitting in the room with them and doing psychotherapy. So we can intentionally work with the biofield in any of the different ways that we want to foster healing for our patients. And that's even through conversation. So of course, I would suspect that you're directly working with the biofield, you're sensing it. And then it's really just, it's a wonderful gift, right? You get to explore that. You get to explore whether you want deeper training. Certainly there are lots of massage therapists and acupuncturists and others that do train in other biofield related practices and use that and kind of integrate that into the other work that they do.
Great. We have another question from Jamie Harvey. I'm curious about studies or research on collective consciousness within groups, such as group visits, and how this relates to biofields and healing.
Great question. This is actually a fun question for us because it relates to a project that we've been doing at the Consciousness and Healing Initiative called The Power of We, where we've been interested in this very question, Jamie, which is a lot of us are meditating together these days, right? And meditation can be done solo and in a group. And while we know a lot about how meditation affects my brain and my body and my stress level, meditation was kind of created for inner and outer harmony. And so we've been doing research exploring how do our biofields potentially connect during collective practice. So about almost 2 years ago now, we took a delegation, again, really spearheaded by Mimi and Rowney, who of course you all know very well, where we took a delegation of scientists to India and started exploring collective meditation practice in different ashrams and different settings to find out, do our biofields connect together during collective practice? And how do people in the ancient traditions, in those cultural settings, kind of those natural cultural settings, what are they saying and how is this happening? We hope to publish actually the initial findings that we've discovered in Pondicherry, India, where we found demonstrated EEG coherence between individuals. So here what we did is we had a portable headset from the Muse group who donated these headsets. So we just were able to collect frontal EEG, no more. We'd love to do it with the whole head. But, we were in this naturalistic setting. We had to do things within the field. What we discovered was that when the group actually went internal together during a particular guided practice where it's called interiorization, where they collectively went inside, their EEGs began to become coherent between them. So it's really fascinating. And it's called hyperscanning is the particular area. And there are some other studies that have been done with hyperscanning, not necessarily in meditation context, but we'd really like to expand that forward. So that's just one way to measure the collective biofield during practice. And we're exploring other ways to measure it as well. So it's a natural area that we need to explore. I just also want to mention with relation to the collective consciousness work, I would be remiss not to talk about the decades of research that has been done by the TM community, that is the Transcendental Meditation community, that have published really provocative findings over the years on the TM Siddhi technique. That is everyone practicing a very particular type of transcendental meditation. These are people that are pretty adept at the practice, that did so for social harmony and social cohesion. And they report that their practices are linked to reductions in crime, reductions in violence. So you could obviously see the relevance of that type of work to today's times. We think it's time to expand this more broadly beyond just one technique to exploring what happens when we practice all kinds of different spiritual training practices together.
Great. We have a question coming in from Lena Bautista. How do you purposefully work with Biofield via telehealth appointments? One doctor said to take the history in a way that increases that person's health and vitality. Do you have any comment on this?
Sure. Well, so this is the part of the wild part of the biofield that, throws some people for a loop. But when you talk to healers, they will say that working with a biofield transcends space and time. What does that mean? Pretty much every healer that we've talked to has said time and distance don't matter. You can work with people effectively using distant healing techniques. And, that does require training and practice, but it is possible. So what that means is that you can provide healing sessions through telehealth means. And there are schools, there are training programs for those who are inclined to kind of go in that direction to do it in that way. This also raises a lively conversation about, is this the same thing as praying for someone? Scientifically, we don't know. And I would like to say the studies on intercessory prayer, as they're called, and distant healing are mixed. They're not all showing effects. Some are showing effects and some aren't. But again, if you ask the practitioners, you can work with a biofield without having to be in the same room with a person.
Thanks, Shamini. And another question from Lori Angel regarding the EEG. Did the EEG show the common alpha 1 wave with that? I practice TM, so thank you for mentioning that information.
Yeah, great. It was not necessarily that particular wave that we saw in the EEG coherence data. I am hoping that we'll be able to publish this as a letter. I mean, the thing is, with research, in order for us to really robustly publish this as a valid scientific paper, we would need to repeat this paradigm about 6 times, just to show that it didn't happen by chance, even though we did have repeated measures within that one session. We didn't have a lot of time there. So we need to explore it more deeply. But we will post, if we haven't already, we'll post our initial findings on our website. If you go again to our website, which is www.chi.is or chi.is, you can see a button there called The Power of We. It actually links to this project that I'm talking about, and actually also a really wonderful dialogue with the meditation teacher at the Sri Aurobindo Ashram in Pondicherry, where he talks about, the nature of the biofield and meditation, and really just a very deep, rich discussion. on Vedic perspectives of the biofield and as it relates to meditation and consciousness. So check out that video and that discussion, but also check out our report and you can get more information on what we found there.
Another question from Jamie Harvey. I'm curious about research exploring the intersection of the biofields of non-human life and humans.
So I should also mention that at the Consciousness and Healing Initiative, we do monthly webinars every month, and we've had most recently some really great in-depth webinars with some of the leaders in biofield science research. One of the latest studies and one of our latest webinars is with Dr. Lorenzo Cohen, who recently published a study looking at the effects of biofield healing energy on tumor shrinkage in a mouse model of cancer. Very robust study. It is, it's published. That's just one example. So the short answer is yes, there have been a number of preclinical studies at this point looking at the effects of biofield energy healing under rigorously controlled conditions in cells and in animals. You can access a lot of that, through the resources that we provide on the website and also through those webinars. Which are available to you to just really explore the dialogue, and they're great because they really walk you through the data, and Lorenzo's data is really, really provocative. It's amazing, and I believe he's continuing on with that line of work. So fascinating stuff and important stuff.
Great. We only have a couple more minutes, and I wanted to ask you, Shamini, if you know of any work with children and biofields and or teaching children about biofields. Would love to know what that space looks like.
Not much there. There are a few studies that have actually looked at, biofield healing for kids, but there's really just a handful of them. And as far as teaching kids about how to sense and work with their own biofields, I haven't seen that. I would love to see it. It needs to be done. And maybe that's something we can explore, doing. Yeah, it's being done, let's say, in informal means. There's no type of program that I'm seeing out on the web. It's, maybe done in certain types of schools, preschools. Certainly my kids went to a preschool. I was very blessed that they went to a preschool where they did explore some of these things. And they explored subtle awareness. They explored meditation. And as you know, Tabby, in Encinitas, there's a yoga program. So from the point of view of bringing people back to subtle awareness and that sort of stuff, even though it's not necessarily language that way, that's what the yoga programs are doing, to a degree.
Wonderful. So I am going to just share my screen just to finish up. And I just really, once again, want to thank Dr. Shamini Jain for all the work you do, for your passion in this area. If you would like to learn more about her work, please go to www.shaminijain.com or www.chi.is. And you can also access the full report at www.reportonhealing.com. And attend all of their amazing webinars and really look into this work because it's very important for all of us. I'm just trying to advance my slides here. So just what's next for us? Please sign up for our virtual conference this year. It will be October 9th, 10th, and 11th, and it will be online this year, but we're really excited. It's shaping up really wonderfully, and we're looking into creating some very interactive spaces as well. So do that. Become renew your current membership. We have free CME for members. We have an updated Find a Provider. So if you're in the Find a Provider, we've actually added a telemedicine space so that you can let patients know if you're actually converted your practice to telemedicine, and other resources for members. If you want to take the next step in your education and learn more about our fellowship program, which again, as Shamini spoke about, we do have biofield training in that program. Please email fellowship@aihm.org. And if you want to join any of our virtual events, we have AIHM chapter meetings, we have our Monday meditations, and these Friday wellness webinars every week, and then monthly town halls. And if you go to aihm.org/events, You can see events all over the country that are happening, as well as these webinars, and you can join any virtual meeting if you're interested in seeing who that speaker is talking about or connecting with that local chapter. So our goal at AIHM is to really keep the integrative community connected. Every organization, every type of integrative healer and practitioner is invited to share and become part of the collective community. So we hope to see you all next week, and please continue joining with us. And again, thank you, Dr. Shamini Jain.
Thank you. My pleasure.